Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Explore and Engage with Anam. I am pleased to let you know that this is the start of Season 8 of my podcast. I started podcasting in 2020, that was Season 1, and it is so amazing to think about my podcasting journey so far. From Season 1 to Season 8, here I am starting Season 8. I want to thank you all for staying connected with me, for continuing to listen to my podcast, and for your words of encouragement. And I'm very, very grateful. And it's just an amazing feeling. So here I am, starting Season 8 of my podcast, and I would like to thank you all. Now, before I jump right into the episode, I just want to say that I have a website. It's tosifanam.net. And if you go to my website, you can sign up for my e-newsletter to receive periodic updates from me. So please do that. The website again is tosifanam.net. My friends, I'm going to start today's episode with an important question. And I want you to listen to this question and to pay attention to this discussion. The question is, are liberals planning to send migrants to red states? Are liberals planning to send migrants to red states? Now, what's a red state? A red state is one where there are more Republican voters than Democrat voters. So as a result, in red states, you'll find more Republican elected officials than Democrat elected officials. For example, a state like Alabama, a state like Mississippi, a state like South Dakota, these are red states. And there are others. Now, Wisconsin happens to be somewhat of a purple state. In the state of Wisconsin, sometimes the Democrats win statewide races, and sometimes the Republicans win statewide races. But if you look at the map of Wisconsin after an election, then you'll see that most of the counties are Republican counties. But then there are a few big counties, for example, Dane County and Milwaukee County. And in these two counties, there are many Republican voters, but there are more Democrat voters. And these are heavily populated counties. So what ends up happening is that most of the state votes Republican, but then a few big populated areas vote heavily for the Democrats, like the city of Madison, the city of Milwaukee. Well, I'll say the entire county of Dane and the entire Milwaukee County. If you take the total votes in these two counties, you'll see that there are more Democrat voters. So in Wisconsin, statewide races, the results of statewide races would largely depend on voter turnout. If there's higher turnout among Republicans, then the Republicans win statewide races. And if there's higher turnout among the Democrat voter population, then especially in places like Dane and Milwaukee counties, then that gives the Democrats an advantage in statewide races. But if you look at the entire state, if you look at the state Senate districts, if you look at the assembly districts, then you'll know that Wisconsin is a very, very conservative state, and there are far more Republican state representatives and far more Republican state senators compared to Democrat state representatives and Democrat state senators. So my conclusion is that Wisconsin is primarily a conservative state, but depending on voter turnout, in the case of statewide races, you can call Wisconsin a purple state because voter turnout matters, and depending on whether the turnout is higher among Republicans or Democrats, the statewide races can go either way. So let's go back to the original discussion, my friends. Will liberals send migrants to red states? Now, I ask that question because if you are paying attention, and if you've been listening to my podcast, then you know that in cities like New York and Chicago, there is massive crisis. New York City has been labeled as a sanctuary city by liberals. Same with Chicago. Chicago has been labeled as a sanctuary city by liberals. And since President Biden came to office, millions and millions of foreign nationals have crossed the southern border to enter the United States illegally. And many of the migrants are going to places like New York and Chicago because the migrants know that both New York and Chicago are sanctuary cities. And in the case of California, California is a sanctuary state. Why? Because the liberals like to label California as a sanctuary state. So as the migrants come in, they are looking for sanctuary communities, and that's why they're going to California, they're going to New York, they're going to Chicago. But what's happening now is that the liberal leaders of New York and Chicago, they're realizing that their cities are running out of housing options. And so now there's a real crisis. Now a lot of these liberal leaders are wondering what to do because the cities don't have the space to house these migrants. Furthermore, the migrants are receiving lots of other services. They're getting free food, they're getting free medical services, and lots of other kinds of services. And who is paying for these services? The taxpayers. The American taxpayers are paying for these services. They are not willingly paying for these services, but what's happening is that the liberal elected officials in New York and Chicago, they are allocating taxpayer funds to provide services to the migrants. And as a result, many New Yorkers, many residents of Chicago are very, very upset. They are upset because they are watching right in front of their eyes, they are watching these liberal politicians take money from their pockets. The liberal politicians are taking money from hardworking Americans and using that money to provide services to these migrants, to these foreign nationals who crossed the southern border and entered our country without permission, without authorization, without any visa. And so as the crisis intensifies in cities like New York and Chicago, a lot of these liberal politicians may be thinking about sending migrants to other communities. And you see the tension. If you're paying attention to the news, you know about the tension in the state of New York, because not every county, not every city in New York is a sanctuary county. Not every city is a sanctuary city. New York City is a sanctuary city, but there are other places in the state of New York that are not sanctuary communities. And so when New York City tries to send migrants to other parts of the state, those communities object to that. Those communities are not willing to accept migrants because those communities are not sanctuary communities. In fact, there are some very, very conservative places in New York where the leaders, the residents, are not willing to accept a flood of migrants in their communities. And so what will these liberal leaders of New York and Chicago do? Are they going to try to resettle these migrants in red states, in states where there's conservative majority? Can that happen? Is that a possibility? That's my question. I want you to share your thoughts and comments with me. What do you think is going to happen? Now, if liberals do end up trying to do this, I think it's going to be a very bad decision, because the Americans, the hardworking Americans, can clearly see what's going on. This crisis has been created by the Biden administration and by liberal politicians in places like New York, Chicago, and California. Because liberals labeled their communities as sanctuary communities, these migrants are going to those places. And because the Biden administration has not enforced our nation's immigration laws, because the Biden administration has not secured the southern border, that's the reason why we have this flood of migrants. That's why we have such a massive influx of foreign nationals who are crossing the southern border to enter the United States. Now, a lot of these left-wing politicians are blaming Governor Abbott of Texas for busing migrants to New York. My friends, let me tell you, Governor Abbott did not label New York as a sanctuary city. Who labeled New York as a sanctuary city? I told you already, the liberals. The liberals made New York a sanctuary city. So Governor Abbott is sending migrants to sanctuary cities because that's what sanctuary cities want. When liberals label a city as a sanctuary city, what they're essentially doing is they're asking for migrants. This is what liberals wanted, but now the same liberals are realizing that their decision to make New York a sanctuary city, to make Chicago a sanctuary city, their decisions have resulted in this crisis that they're dealing with right now. I think Governor Abbott is one of the best governors in America. And in fact, I think he may actually be the best governor. I think he is the best governor in America because he is representing the people of Texas. He's fighting, he's working hard for his constituents, and he is doing a lot to try to keep the people of Texas safe. He's a really hardworking governor. He's an excellent elected official. He opposes what's happening at the border, and he is doing the best he can to protect the people of Texas. But it's because of the Biden administration's policies we have this border crisis. My friends, I think that if the liberals try to resettle migrants in red states, then the red state governors must firmly prevent any such plan from being successful. They must not accept migrants in their states. The migrants must not be resettled in red states. Red states are not sanctuary states. If Eric Adams is the mayor of New York City. If Mayor Eric Adams wants to send migrants to California, another sanctuary state, he can do that, okay? But don't send migrants to Wyoming. Don't send migrants to South Dakota. Don't send migrants to the state of Iowa, because these states are not asking for asylum seekers. These states are not asking for migrants. I think sanctuary cities should deal with this crisis, because there are many other cities, towns, and villages, and counties, and states that are not sanctuary communities, and so they must not deal with this crisis. They should not have to suffer because of Biden's border crisis. And this is getting worse every single day. In Chicago, what's happening in Chicago? Let me give you some update here. In Chicago, Mayor Brandon Johnson is considering building a tent city for migrants in the parking lot of a former Jewel Osco. The residents from the area are not happy. Chicago residents are not happy. They don't want to see their community becoming a tent city with migrants flooding into the area. And what's happening in New York? In New York, some Democrat politicians recently held a news conference, and I watched some video clips of the conference. There were people loudly chanting, "Close the border, close the border, close the border." New Yorkers were chanting, "Close the border, close the border." New Yorkers want to see our government secure the southern border. But left-wing politicians who advocate for keeping American border open do not represent the will of the people. It's shocking. It's shocking to see that Democrats are tying illegal immigration with this so-called climate change. Democrats are saying that people are fleeing countries facing environmental disasters, and that's why they're coming to the United States. What exactly do you mean by environmental disasters? Don't we have floods in the United States? Don't we have hurricanes in the United States? Don't we have wildfires in the United States? Don't we have drought in the United States? Don't we have tremendous amounts of snow in the winter in a place like Wisconsin, in a place like Illinois, in a place like Minnesota, Michigan? Don't we suffer from uh, these natural disasters? The laws of nature affect the entire world. The laws of nature affect the entire world. What kind of environmental disasters do Democrats say that these migrants are facing? What kind of environmental disasters are taking place in other parts of the world that's leading to people leaving those countries and coming here? Well, we have enough natural disasters. As I said, we have hurricanes, we have floods, we have wildfires. So this is not a reason, okay? This is not a valid reason. The reason why the migrants are coming into the United States is because the United States is the greatest country in the world, and Biden is keeping the border open, which is making our country unsafe, which is making our country, back in 2019, we were doing great, but since Biden came to office, our economy has been doing really bad, and this influx of migrants is going to harm our economy, and it's going to make our communities less safe, because a lot of the people who are coming in, we don't know who they are. We don't know what their background is, because let me tell you, my friends, legal immigrants, people, foreign nationals who follow the law, who follow the proper immigration process and come into the United States legally, they have to go through thorough background check. But the foreign nationals who are crossing the border and walking into our country, we don't know who they are. They are not going through background check. We don't know who they are. We don't know their background. We don't know where they're coming from. So this unknown, there's this big unknown when you look at this migrant population. Now, there are many who are coming here for the opportunity for a better life, but then there are others who may have backgrounds that are not so great, and because these individuals are not vetted, they haven't gone through any background check, we don't know who they are, but they are coming into our country, and it's because of Biden administration's policies. The Biden administration has not secured the southern border. We need to secure the southern border to stop this flow of migrants. So going back to the issue of the Democrats saying that people are coming into the United States because they are fleeing environmental disasters. Well, this kind of correlation that Democrats try to come up with is pure nonsense, okay? Democrats say that people are fleeing bad weather and coming to the United States. How absurd is that? A liberal politician recently said that these migrants will take New York City to a better place. Will take New York City to a better place. How exactly will the migrants take New York City to a better place? That's my question. They are already absorbing taxpayer money from hardworking Americans. Migrants are flooding the streets of New York, and I blame the liberals who are allowing the southern border to remain open. So, because of the migrants, Americans are losing their taxpayer dollars. Americans are already suffering from inflation and supply chain problems and high gas prices and lots of other economic issues. And on top of that, they are watching their tax dollars go towards the migrants. Liberals are taking money from hardworking Americans and providing services to the foreign nationals who crossed the southern border to enter the United States. My friends, American citizens elect leaders so that these leaders can govern in a way that protects people. But that's not what liberal politicians are doing. Their open border policy is hurting Americans. Share with me your thoughts. Thank you for continuing to listen to my podcast. If you agree with me, let me know. If you disagree with my views, share with me why you disagree. Let's have a dialogue. Let's have a debate. Um, you can also connect with me on social media. And this is the first episode of Season 8. Thank you for continuing to listen to my podcast. And I hope to be back again soon with a new episode of Explore and Engage with Anam.